silver thread of Ning S-ray. The air in the stilted wooden house hung thick and sweet with the smell of overripe mangoes and dying incense. It was a smell I'd always associated with my grandmother, a scent of quiet endings and sticky, humid afternoons. Now, it was just the smell of decay. I had been in her house for 3 days, sent from the noise and concrete of Phnom Penh to sort through a life that had ended a month ago. A fever had taken hold of me on the second day, a low, simmering heat that made my thoughts swim and my skin feel too tight. The village doctor said it was just the change of climate, the stress. He gave me chalky white pills that did nothing. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the sugar palms, I was rummaging through her old camphor wood chest. The fever made me clumsy, my fingers weak. That's when I found it, nestled beneath layers of faded sarongs and moth-eaten prayer books. A Sampot haul, a traditional skirt of pleated silk. But it was unlike any I had ever seen. The silk was the color of a stormy twilight, a deep, bruised purple, and woven into it were thousands of intricate silver threads. They formed patterns of celestial dancers, Apsara, their bodies frozen in impossible grace. A strange compulsion seized me. My grandmother was a simple woman. She never wore anything so fine. Yet I felt a pull, a sense of ownership, as if this piece of fabric had been waiting for me. My clothes were stuck to me with sweat, and the thought of this cool, ancient silk was an impossible comfort. As I wrapped the ancient silk Sampot around my waist, the fabric felt unnaturally cold against my fever-warm skin. The cold was a shock, a deep, penetrating chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. It felt like sinking into river water in the dry season. The intricate silver threads seemed to drink the last of the day's light, shimmering with a life of their own. I walked to the only mirror in the house, a tall, warped piece of glass propped against the wall, its surface spotted with age like a leopard's skin. The reflection that stared back was a stranger. My face was hollowed, my skin stretched taut over my cheekbones, but it was my eyes that frightened me. They were wide with a placid emptiness, a serene stillness I didn't recognize. My own anxieties, my grief, my physical discomfort, they were all gone from that reflection, replaced by a calm that was ancient and absolute. Then the world outside went quiet. The deafening electric chorus of night cicadas, the soundtrack to every rural Cambodian evening, abruptly fell silent. Not faded, not tapered off. It was as if a switch had been thrown. The air pressed in, heavy and waiting. And in that sudden, profound silence, a new sound began. It was the faint, rhythmic whisper of a single voice. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the dark, dusty space beneath the floorboards, from the stilts and the packed earth where the chickens slept. A chant, soft, sibilant, and ceaseless. I stood frozen, the cold of the silk creeping up my spine, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against the placid emptiness in the mirror. The voice beneath the floor whispered on, a secret meant only for me. My first thought was a rational one, a city thought. Someone was under the house. A vagrant, maybe, or children playing a prank. I crept to the wooden shutters of the window, my bare feet silent on the cool timber floor. Peering through the slats, I saw nothing but the deep shadows pooling under the house, the familiar shapes of clay water pots and my grandmother's old weaving loom. No movement, no sign of life. But the chanting continued, a steady, hypnotic murmur. It wasn't in a language I understood, not modern Khmer. The words were older, the cadence like something from a classical performance or a monk's prayer. I strained to make out the syllables, but they slipped through my mind like water. The only thing I could grasp was the rhythm, the rise and fall that seemed to match the slow, deep beat of a drum I could feel more than hear. I backed away from the window, my hand pressed to my mouth. The fever was making me imagine things. It had to be. I was alone, grieving in a house full of memories that weren't all mine. I decided to take off the Sampot. Its coldness was no longer a comfort. It felt parasitic, leaching the warmth from my body. But when I reached for the knot at my waist, my fingers fumbled. The silk, which had felt so smooth just moments before, now seemed coarse, clinging to my skin. I pulled, and a sharp, stinging pain shot through my side, as if a thread had snagged on my flesh. I looked down. The silver threads glittered against my skin, and for a terrifying second, it looked as if they had woven themselves into the pores of my skin. Panic set in, cold and sharp. I yanked harder, ignoring the pain. The knot finally came undone, and the silk fell in a shimmering pool around my ankles. The relief was immediate. Warmth flooded back into my skin, and the profound, unnatural calm in my mind shattered, replaced by my own frantic fear. I kicked the Sampot away into the darkest corner of the room. As soon as the fabric lay still, the chanting from under the house stopped, just like that. The silence returned, but it was different this time. It wasn't empty, it was listening. And then slowly, one by one, the cicadas started their song again, their familiar drone a welcome blanket against the terror. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my thin mattress, a single candle burning, watching the corner where the Sampot lay. In the flickering light, the silver threads seemed to squirm, to rearrange themselves into new patterns. I was too afraid to touch it, too afraid to even look at it for long. I told myself it was a trick of the light, an effect of the fever that still pulsed in my temples. The next morning, the world felt normal again. The sun streamed in, merciless and bright. The sounds of the village, a distant rooster, the laughter of children, the gentle thud of a rice pounder, were reassuringly mundane. The fever had broken, leaving me weak but clear-headed. I walked over to the corner, my heart thudding. The Sampot was just a piece of fabric, a beautiful old piece of fabric. I picked it up. It was just silk. Cool, yes, but not the soul-stealing cold from the night before. I folded it carefully, my hands shaking slightly, and placed it back in the deepest part of the chest, burying it under everything else. I shut the lid, the sound echoing in the quiet house. I needed a distraction. I decided to call my brother in Phnom Penh. Getting a signal was an ordeal. I had to walk to the end of the dusty village path, by the old banyan tree wrapped in saffron cloth. "Bang Vuthi," I said when the call finally connected. "Aundara, how are you? How is the house?" His voice was a slice of my real life, of traffic and air conditioning and logic. "I'm okay. The house, it's old, Bang. It makes strange noises." I tried to keep my voice light. "Of course it does. It's 100 years old and made of wood. What did you expect? Just get Yee's things sorted so we can decide what to do with the place." He was always practical. "Vuthi, did ye ever talk about spirits, or anything strange in the house?" He sighed, a sound of static-filled impatience. "Dara, you've been in the countryside for 3 days and you're already thinking like them. Yi was a devout Buddhist. She prayed, she gave offerings. That's all. Don't listen to village gossip. There are no ghosts, only memories." I wanted to tell him about the chanting, about the cold silk and my reflection, but hearing his voice made it all sound foolish, like the ravings of a sick girl. "You're right," I mumbled. "It's just the fever. Get some rest, Aun. Call me when you're coming back to the city." The call dropped. I stood there by the banyan tree, feeling more alone than ever. The small, colorful spirit houses at the base of the tree watched me with their empty doorways. I knew Vuthi was wrong. Some memories weren't just in your head. Some stayed behind, waiting. Later that day, I was sweeping the raised porch when my neighbor, an elderly woman named Yi S. Rose, shuffled over from her house next door. Her face was a beautiful map of wrinkles, her eyes cloudy with cataracts but sharp with an intelligence that missed nothing. "Good morning, child," she said, her voice raspy. She carried a small plate with 2 pieces of steamed coconut cake, an offering of friendship. "Thank you, Yi S. Rose," I said, accepting it with a grateful smile. She didn't smile back. Her gaze drifted over my shoulder towards the open door of my grandmother's house. "This house has been quiet for a long time," she said, her voice low. "It does not like to be disturbed." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother, she understood the house. She knew how to keep the peace. She made offerings. She spoke the old words. She kept the doors and windows shut after dusk. Yi Rose looked at me directly then, and her cloudy eyes seemed to see right through my skin. "You look pale, child, not just from sickness. There is a shadow on you, a coolness." I almost dropped the plate. I had a fever. "It is not a fever of the body," she whispered, leaning closer. "It is a fever of the spirit. The old ones, when they get lonely, they look for warmth. They look for a new vessel to feel the sun and smell the jasmine again." She pointed a trembling finger at the house. "Be careful what you touch in there, especially the old things, the beautiful things. Beauty can be a trap, a promise. Some spirits are bound to their beauty." Her words hung in the air long after she had shuffled back to her own home. A fever of the spirit, a new vessel. I looked back at my grandmother's house. It no longer seemed like a quiet, dusty home. It seemed like a cage, and I was beginning to realize I wasn't the one holding the key. That night I resolved to ignore it. I would sleep, and in the morning I would pack a few important things and leave the rest. I would tell Vuthi the job was done. I wouldn't open the chest. I wouldn't think about the Sampot. But the house had other plans. I fell into a fitful sleep and I began to dream. In the dream, I was not in the bedroom. I was in the main room and I was wearing the Sampot. The cold silk was a second skin. My body felt light, impossibly graceful. My hands, not my own, lifted, my fingers bending back in the elegant, unnatural curve of a classical dancer. The music started, the sound of a phantom pinbeat orchestra, the high, clear notes of a ronat, the rhythmic beat of a samphire drum. The music was inside me. My feet began to move, my body swaying, turning, performing the intricate, sacred steps of a dance I had never learned. I was dancing in the dark, my only audience the warped mirror on the wall. I moved towards it, and in the dream, its surface was no longer spotted and old. It was clear as a pool of still water. My reflection was there, dancing with me, but it wasn't my face. It was the face of a woman of breathtaking, severe beauty. High cheekbones, eyes shaped like lotus petals, and a mouth set in a line of serene power. Her expression was one of intense concentration, of joy, of possession. I watched, a prisoner in my own body, as this stranger danced using my limbs. Then she stopped. She stood perfectly still, her reflection staring out of the mirror, directly at the dreamer, at the part of me that was still me. She smiled, a slow, cold curving of lips that were mine, but a smile that held no warmth. And then she spoke, her voice a silken whisper that echoed the chant from under the floorboards. "You are a poor host," she said, the words forming in my own throat. "Weak, but you will learn." I woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat. My heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs. I was in my bed, tangled in my thin blanket, but the air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, my grandmother's favorite flower, a flower that didn't grow anywhere near the house. And on the floor next to my bed were two perfect, fallen jasmine blossoms. They hadn't been there when I went asleep. I didn't need any more proof. This wasn't grief or fever. Yi Rose was right. Something was in the house, something ancient and lonely, and it had chosen me. Driven by a terror that was colder and sharper than the silk itself, I decided to find out what my grandmother had been hiding. I spent the next day tearing the house apart. I wasn't just sorting anymore. I was searching. I looked for a diary, for letters, for anything that would explain the Sampot and the spirit bound to it. Finally, in a loose floorboard beneath her simple bed, I found a small lacquer box. It was locked. I broke the tiny, rusted clasp with a kitchen knife. Inside, there was no journal. There was just a single yellowed photograph and a bundle of incense sticks tied with a red string. The photograph was old, from the French colonial era. It showed a young woman, no older than myself, dressed in the magnificent silver-threaded Sampot. She was standing in the formal, stiff pose of early photography, but her beauty was undeniable. It was the face from my dream, the dancer in the mirror. On the back, in faint, spidery script, was a name, Ning Esre, and a single line of Khmer. Ko Krobi, 1928, A promise to the guardian. Guardian, the word sent a shiver through me. A guardian of what? The family, the house, and what promise? I remembered the name of the island, Khmer. I'd heard stories about it. A small, uninhabited island on the river, a place the local villagers avoided. They said it was a place of powerful spirits, a place where pacts were made and deals were struck with the other world. My grandmother hadn't just owned the Sampot. She had inherited a responsibility, a promise made almost 100 years ago, and in her old age, perhaps she had grown too weak to keep it. The chanting I heard, it wasn't a threat. It was a summons, a ritual, a calling to the next in line. The sun was beginning to set again. I knew I couldn't spend another night in that house. I grabbed a small bag, stuffing it with my essentials, my phone, the photograph. I was going to go to the village pagoda to ask the monks for a blessing, for protection. But as I turned to leave, my eyes fell on the camphor wood chest. The lid was slightly ajar. I knew I hadn't left it like that. A cold dread washed over me. I walked towards it slowly, as if in a trance. I lifted the heavy lid. The clothes and books I had used to bury the Sampot were neatly folded and stacked to one side. And there, lying on top, perfectly displayed as if in a shop window, was the Sampot Hall. The silver thread seemed to pulse with a soft, internal light in the dying sun. It looked expectant. And I heard the voice again, not from under the floorboards this time. It was right behind me, a whisper in my ear as cold as a serpent's touch. "Where are you going, little sister? The dance is not over." I spun around, crying out. There was no one there, but the scent of jasmine was so strong it was dizzying. I slammed the chest shut and ran. I fled the house, not even bothering to close the door, my bare feet slapping against the dusty path. I didn't look back. I could feel her eyes on me, the placid, empty eyes of my own reflection. I ran all the way to Yi S. Rose's house. I beat on her door, babbling incoherently about the voice, the dream, the Sampot. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside, bolting the door behind us. She sat me down, gave me a cup of hot, sweet ginger tea that scalded my throat. I showed her the photograph. Her eyes widened and she muttered a prayer under her breath. "Ning Esre," she breathed. "The dancer of Khmer. My grandmother used to tell stories. She was an ancestor of your line, a royal court dancer of great fame. They said her grace was a gift from the spirits, the Tevoda." "What happened to her?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The story says that during the Troubles, when the old ways were being destroyed, she made a pact. She prayed to the oldest spirits of the land. She promised her own spirit would stand as a guardian for her bloodline, to ensure it would never be broken, that its artistry and beauty would survive. In return, she would never be forgotten. She would be given a home, a vessel, a body to wear from generation to generation." A vessel, the word was like a physical blow. "The Sampot," I whispered, "it's how she does it." "It is the anchor," Yi S. Rose confirmed, her face grim. "It is her promise woven in silk and silver. Your grandmother wore it. She danced the old dances in the dark of night. It kept her strong, but it also consumed her. It is why she pushed everyone away. She was fighting a war inside her own skin. Now her fight is over, and Ning Esre is looking for her new home." The room was dark now. Outside, the sounds of the night began. The geckos, the frogs, and then the high, electric hum of the cicadas. And beneath it, ever so faintly, I could hear it. The rhythmic, whispering chant carried on the wind from my grandmother's house. She was calling for me. "What do I do?" I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Can the monks help?" Yi S. Rose shook her head slowly. "This is not a simple ghost, a Khmer. This is family, an ancestor, a guardian. To fight her is to fight your own blood. You cannot banish her. You can only refuse the invitation." "How?" "You must give the Sampot back," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You must take it to the place where the promise was made, to Khmer. You must return it to the spirits she bargained with. You must show them the promise is over, that your family no longer needs a guardian of this kind. The thought of going back into that house, of touching that silk, filled me with a primal dread. But the thought of Ning Esray's cold smile in my mirror, of her voice in my head for the rest of my life, was infinitely worse. Yi Esrose gave me a small krama, a scarf, blessed by the local monks, and a handful of protective amulets. This will shield you for a time, but she is strong. You must go tonight. At dawn, her power will settle and it will be too late. Returning to the house was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every step felt like walking into my own tomb. The door was still wide open, a gaping mouth. Inside, the air was freezing and the scent of jasmine was suffocating. I forced myself to walk to the chest. My hands shook so badly I could barely lift the lid. The Sampot lay there, waiting. I wrapped my hand in the blessed krama and picked it up. Even through the cloth, the cold was intense, a dead, absolute cold. It felt like holding a piece of the night itself. I wrapped the entire Sampot in the krama, tying it into a tight bundle. As I did, the chanting from below grew frantic, desperate. A low moan echoed through the house, the sound of a woman being denied her birthright. The wooden frame of the house groaned in sympathy. I didn't wait. I ran out again, clutching the bundle to my chest, and headed for the river path. Yi Esrose had told me where I could find a small boat. The path to the river was dark, overgrown. The moon was hidden by thick clouds. The jungle pressed in on all sides, its noises a mixture of the familiar and the menacing. I could feel her presence behind me, a cold weight on the air. She wasn't in the house anymore. She was with me. I could hear her whispers in the rustle of the leaves, see the flash of her silver threads in the corner of my eye. My own thoughts began to fragment. A part of my mind, a calm, graceful part, was telling me to stop, to go back, to put on the beautiful silk, to dance. It whispered of power, of beauty that never fades, of a life free from sickness and fear. It was a tempting song. I found the small fishing boat exactly where Yi Esrose said it would be. Pushing it into the dark, sluggish water, I began to paddle towards the shadow on the horizon that was Koh Krobi. The island looked like a sleeping beast, a hump of dense jungle rising from the Black River. As I got closer, the air grew still and heavy. The normal river sounds died away. There was only the sound of my paddle dipping into the water and the frantic beating of my own heart. The bundle in front of me felt like it was vibrating, humming with a contained energy. I beached the boat on a sliver of muddy shore. The jungle on the island was even thicker than on the mainland. Ancient trees dripped with vines and the air smelled of damp earth and rot. At the center of the island, Yi Esrose had told me, was a ruined shrine, a small stone praset crumbling back into the earth. That was where the pact was made. I stumbled through the undergrowth, branches catching at my clothes. The whispers were louder now inside my head. It was her voice, Ning Esray's voice, pleading then demanding. She showed me images, a glorious life as a celebrated dancer, the admiration in 100 eyes, a body that would never age, never tire. She promised me everything. I finally saw it. The shrine was little more than a pile of moss-covered stones, dominated by a headless statue of a female deity. This was the place. The air here was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. I unwrapped the Sampot from the krama. In the oppressive darkness of the island, the silver threads glowed with a fierce, cold light. The fabric unspooled in my hands, flowing like liquid moonlight. The moment it was free, the voice in my head screamed, a sound of pure rage and betrayal. I draped the Sampot over the headless statue, an offering. "The promise is over," I said, my voice shaking but loud in the unnatural silence. "My family is free. We don't need your protection anymore. Go to rest, Ning Esray." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wind rose, a sudden gale that tore through the small clearing, whipping my hair and clothes. The Sampot on the statue began to writhe, to dance in the wind, its silver threads flashing like lightning. From the fabric, a shape began to form. a shimmering, translucent figure of a woman in the full regalia of a royal dancer. It was her. Her face was no longer serene. It was contorted in a mask of fury. Her lotus petal eyes were black pits of emptiness. She drifted towards me, her feet not touching the ground. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a shriek that vibrated in my bones. You break the blood pact. You discard my gift. I kept you safe. I am your strength. I am your beauty. You are nothing without me. I held up the small amulet Yi Esros had given me, clutching it like a shield. I squeezed my eyes shut and started reciting the only prayer I knew by heart, the words tumbling from my lips in a desperate, broken stream. The shriek intensified and a wave of icy cold washed over me, so intense it burned. It felt like dying. I thought my heart would stop. I kept praying, my voice getting lost in the storm of her rage. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The wind died, the cold receded, the screaming stopped. I opened my eyes. The clearing was silent and still. The Sampot was still draped on the statue, but it looked different. The silver threads were dull, tarnished, as if centuries had passed in an instant. The fabric looked old, fragile, and empty, just a piece of silk. She was gone. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, crashing through the jungle, back to the boat, back to the river. I paddled until my arms burned, not stopping until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I left the village that day. I packed one bag and took the first bus back to Phnom Penh. I never went back to my grandmother's house. My brother Vuthi sold it a few months later to a family from the city looking for a weekend home. I never told him the real reason I left. He would never have understood. Life is normal now. I have a job, friends, the comforting noise of the city. The fever never returned, but I am not the same. I don't wear silk anymore. The feel of it against my skin makes me sick. I avoid mirrors in dark rooms. Sometimes, when the night is very quiet, I can almost hear the faint, rhythmic whisper of a chant on the edge of hearing. And some nights I dream. I dream of dancing in a dark room, my body moving with a grace that is not my own. I wake up with the ghost scent of jasmine in my room and a profound sense of loss. I refused her invitation, yes. I gave her back to the island, but a part of me knows she is not gone forever. She is a guardian, she is patient. She is bound to my bloodline. I am safe for now. But I often wonder about the future, about my children or my children's children. Will they one day find a beautiful, ancient Sampot woven with silver threads? Will they feel its unnatural cold, hear its whispered promises of beauty and power? A family's legacy is a complicated thing. Some inherit land, some inherit wealth. We inherited a promise, and I am terrified that one day someone in my family will be lonely or weak or vain enough to accept it. So if you are ever cleaning out the home of an elder, be careful, be respectful, and if you find something of breathtaking beauty, something that feels like it was made just for you, something that feels cold when all the world is warm, perhaps it is best to leave it in the dark and shut the door forever. Some legacies are not meant to be worn.